You know, I don't look like a rock star, I don't sing like a rock star.
That's where a lot of the songs came from. It's not encouraged to grow up. Well, you know some people.
I've never heard anything like that.
I'll give you a countdown of 5, 4.
Every creative expression is a snapshot of a moment.
Gary, as in Gary Numan in the new century. Let's take Pure and Jagged. First of all, Pure was around the very beginning of the century. Jagged was the middle of the first decade. That's quite a long gap for Gary Numan.
It is.
Why was there a long gap?
First of all, I had some record company problems that I had to get sorted out. It took a while.
Gary, hold on, I'm going to stop you there. Look, everybody has record company problems, and then they get over them. You actually have had record company problems for about 25 years. Sometimes I think you're one of the guys that never really learns, and it's kind of good for you, maybe.
No, it never learns, but it's a new set of problems each time. The problem with record companies is, in general, it seems to me, that whoever you sign with, and whoever was your champion when they took you there, within 3 months have gone. Someone else comes in, they bring all their people in, and they're not interested. And so that's why you play this, you know, it's like hopscotch, you just keep hopping around from one to the other. But this particular one was a completely different set of problems to that altogether, and was much more to do with, it was just corrupt.
Right, okay, but there were good things as well that got in the way. Fatherhood.
Yeah,
That's
that was the
pretty
main
good.
thing, really. You know, we've been trying for children for 7 years, I think. We ended up going the IVF route and had quite a few problems with that as well. And eventually, Gemma gets pregnant, and she was a twin to start with. One of the twins died, so it was traumatic.
Yeah.
So when she arrived, I didn't want to miss a second of it, and so I just didn't do any. I didn't write a song for. It should have been a year. I think it was more like 18 months by the time it was finished. But I just saw everything.
Right.
First step, first laugh, everything. Amazing.
So you're never going to have that regret that so many people do who are working too hard. God is mentioned in 5 songs on the Jagged album. I just want to say, when the album was over, did you know that? Or did that have to be pointed out to you? And you went, did I mention God 5 times? Why?
It's just a recurring theme for me. The last album and the one before that was I think all of the songs mentioned it and was about it. So I was actually trying to get away from it with a new one a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's a constant fascination to me.
Okay, but the constant fascination for most people who look upon the music of Gary Numan, who aren't part of, say, a Gary Numan fan club, is the early years. Now, the early years, it's great to look at those years, and maybe a lot of people would show attention to what you're doing now because of those. But in another way, a lot of the stuff you're doing now, and even in the 90s, and even in the later 80s, it was all shrouded over because people kept looking back at the other stuff. Can you see the good side of both those things, or do you sometimes have the bad side creep in? You say, yeah, I wish they'd just shut up about the early days.
Yeah, I don't see anything good about looking backwards. I really don't. I hate nostalgia with a passion I can barely put into words. And I think there's too many artists that will live on past glories and these here and now tours. You know, people that go out and do just all their old stuff from their heyday, and just depressing. It's like giving up, isn't it? When you start doing that and just living on what you've done 20 years ago, you're like admitting you've got nothing new to offer.
That's one of those nostalgia tours, chicken in a basket, Bately's Variety Club kind of tours that you're talking about up the M1 in a transit. But
no, these are big arenas.
Okay, even the big ones,
9,000
stands
people
of the 80s and whatever it happens to be, Duran Duran and Kim Wilde and all the rest of it. Yeah. But I mean, you're releasing new stuff all the time.
Yeah.
So if people look back, it's to put it into some kind of context. It's not the same as looking back with some of the others we might have just mentioned.
It depends on what they're looking back for, doesn't it? And if they're looking back just to check out your history and the way things have evolved, I've got no problem with that. But if people turn up wanting to hear just songs from 1979 and 1980, then I feel like I'm being held back.
Yeah, but Gary Numan fans aren't going to look for that. It's people who write about Gary Numan might. I mean, for instance, when you do look back at something, you had, like, you know, a #1 album, #1 single, and 6 months later you had another #1 album and #1 single. That's pretty huge, you know, like, that's something that cannot be ignored. That's a chapter in the history of pop music alone. So, you know, it's important. You can't just dismiss it. Hard luck.
I can.
Can you?
Yeah, because it's done. It's been done. If people want to dwell in that sort of thing, and if it means a lot to people, then look at it. But for me, I'm not interested. I'm really, honestly not. You know, I'm much more concerned sitting here about what I'm going to do tomorrow.
Sure.
Compared to what I did yesterday. And that applies to songs as well. You know, I still believe that I can write better songs than anything I've written before. I think I am doing with Jagged. And my whole approach is to just constantly keep trying to move forward. And don't want to keep looking back.
Okay, the critics would agree with you, by the way. Now, the critics, there's always been a thing about Gary Numan and critics, but lately, since, say, the last 10 years, the critics would agree that you're writing better stuff than you've ever done before, that it's as relevant as anything else that's selling 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 times as much within the genres or within the fields that we're talking about here. So, is it a nice feeling that, or do you just not care? Because there was a time when you opened every door for 20 bands I could mention, and you're the one who was kind of laughed at, if you like, by the critics.
Yeah.
One of the reasons, by the way, they laughed at you was, I'm going to give a quote here about you here, which is like not laughed at you, but they said something like, you know, you were driven, you were creative, you were a troubled 21-year-old loner still living with your parents. They didn't know where to put you. Like, you know, there was punk and you weren't punk. There was new wave, or there was, what do you call it, the kind of new romantic stuff 10 years later, and you weren't new romantic. And yet, you hinged and touched on an awful lot of that. They were the ones who didn't know what to do with you. Surely that's a good thing for you.
Yeah, I think it is. You would rather have an extreme reaction, good or bad, than for people to be, you can care less one way or the other. So it's grim, you know, when it's all anti and so on. But that side of it, as you say, is very much improved now. For the last 10 years, my relationship with the press has been much better. Yeah. Much better, you know, out of all recognition to what it was before. But
you also said earlier on that you're interested in tomorrow more than you were interested in anything else, so long, especially if the past is just nostalgia for its own sake. But tomorrow, you've always been interested in sounds of tomorrow, if you like. Ever since you started, you were supposedly futuristic in so many different ways. You still are. You still seem to be looking out for new sounds and new things all the time. Yeah. Is that the obvious thing that drives you? Is that what it's all about? It has to be something new?
It is what it's about for me, yeah. Every album is an attempt to do two things. To find a whole range of new sounds and new ways of using those sounds, and to make up or repair the mistakes you made on the previous album. You always get things wrong. And so you're constantly learning from your own mistakes and just constantly searching for other people. Because, you know, the world is full of people with really good ideas. You know, you just shut yourself in your own little room thinking that you're God's gift to music, you're just going to get left out in the cold, because I've got some, but there are millions more out there, and you just got to keep searching for them and finding them. And everything that you can pick up, you can then use in your own thing, put your own spin on it, and keep moving forward with your own music. And that's what keeps it exciting. You know, I've been doing this a long time, and that's the only way I can think, really, that I've stayed with it and stayed so enthusiastic about it, is because it is a constant search for something new.
You'd like more chart success than you have, but I know you're happy with the way things are. You'd like more singles chart success, but I know you're happy with the way things are. If you're going to get that, you know yourself, you would have to compromise the music. Would you even, for 1 second, think of that?
No, well, I've been down this route, you see. Things started very well for me, you know, just #1 singles and albums and so on, doing music that was absolutely from the heart. You know, there hadn't been anything like it before, really, so there was nobody to guide you and mould you to say, this is what you need to do. But I made it anyway, which was 90% luck, I'll admit, but nonetheless, something that you can be proud of. And then the career started to struggle for quite a long time, actually. And in that period, I then started to try to search for ways of keeping the career successful, building it back up again, and, you know, chart singles, radio play, that kind of thing. And that became a really soul-destroying experience, really. You end up not liking what you're doing, not really having any kind of identity about what you want to sing about or what sounds you want to make. And it was really, that middle period for me was rubbish, absolutely rubbish. And so it seems to me, from '94 onwards, I've just gone back to the way I was when I first started, just doing what you love. Hope you have success with it, but the most important thing is to love being in the studio and love the life that it gives you. And that's where I am. That's where I've been for the last 12 years. And I can't ever seem to be going back to that middle period again where you're searching for success.
When you say '94, you're talking Saviour direction. Is it Machine and Soul was the one before that?
Yeah. That
around '91, I say. Is that the lowest point you've ever been, the beginning of the '90s?
Machine and Soul?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Oh, an abysmal record.
Well, hold on. When you sat down to make that record, when you went into the studio to make that record, at what point did you say this is abysmal? Did you say, look, it's abysmal, but I'll go with it anyway?
Oh, I had no choice. No choice. I was 600 grand in debt. After just career was finished, pretty much. You know, just in a right state. Absolutely in a terrible state from everything. Personal life, money, career, everything. In a right state. And that was as good as I could do at the time. So you put out what you've got.
Okay, but the thing, the Gary Numan thing, like of the 25, 26, 27 years longevity, the thing about it is that you never went away. You were always out there making music. Are you proud of that? I mean, even of the metal and soul, or the Machine and Soul